I can probably, with more confidence, say that the problem will spread to Northern Europe. I think it's just a matter of time before France and Belgium are attacked by the bond vigilantes. Bond vigilantes being just international investors suddenly getting concerned about whether these governments are a safe bet. Because France and Belgium's already over 100% of GDP for their government debt. France is approaching that level. France's economy has basically flatlined. All their purchasing manager indexes, all these different indices that are supposedly good predictions of future economic activity. France is in very tough shape. And Hollande, of course, is a crazy socialist. He was the one who wanted to put in the 75% tax rate. So entrepreneurs and investors are moving out of the country. I mean, it's almost as if he's, I'm sure he's not. But it's almost as if he wants to deliberately destroy the country. And I think it's working, even though it's unintentional in his case. He just happens to believe in this fairy tale vision of redistribution. So I think France and Belgium, especially because Belgium has so much political instability, I just think that those countries are going to be next. But don't forget, because of demographics, even the well-run countries of Northern Europe are going to get hit. When you have aging population like this and birth rates like this and projections that countries are actually going to see population shrinkage in our lifetimes, what's the welfare state based on? The welfare state is based upon the fact that you have a population pyramid. Very few old people at the top, a lot of workers, and then a lot of children who are going to be the future workers. But that population pyramid in these countries is becoming a population cylinder. Lots and lots of old people, very low birth rates, so not a lot of young people coming up, and of course, it's not just how many working age people you have, but how many working age people are actually working. Because in a lot of these European countries, it's a lot easier just to get on some government benefit payment program, and that's a very this isn't like some cheerleader at a football game. This is what you should think of when you think about Europe collapsing. And of course, that's the long run reason why they want this pot of gold that they think is in Anguilla. And even if you're well run, and Germany is well run. I don't like the fact that they have big government, but it's well run. Sweden is well run. Denmark is well run. But even if you're well run, as that is happening, it becomes harder and harder to make the numbers add up. And then politically, let's add in this one other factor. Your population is going like this. You're in Germany, you're in Sweden, you've historically been a well-run country. You want to tell the voters, oh, because we're going like this, we need to make reforms. But will that be possible? And let's look at Greece as an example, because it's going to happen in these other countries. Who are the voters? Well, when you add up the people who are collecting government handouts, and my favorite story from Greece is you had someone getting a disability payment for blindness when they worked off the books as a tour guide for bird watchers. So you have all the people in the Greek economy who are getting direct welfare and disability payments and stuff like that. Then you have all the people in Greece that are working for the government, except working would be an overstatement, employed by the government. And then you have all the people who are retired and living off the government. And in Greece, if you're in a hazardous profession like hairdressing, you can retire as early as age 48. Now, you add up those three big groups of the population, what do you have? You have more than 50% of the voting age population. And now, it's not as bad in Germany and Sweden, but over time, it's getting that way. So how does Greece reform today? It's not just that they have this, it's that middle group of people, most of them are riding in the wagon instead of pulling the wagon. So how do you tell people who are riding in the wagon, you need to vote to make the wagon less luxurious? It's not going to happen. And so by the time Germany and Sweden and these other countries have to make these political choices as well, maybe they're going to have too many people riding in the wagon as well. So it gets to be a very depressing situation. Even some of the, one of my favorite countries, although it's far too cold, is Estonia. Estonia has a flat tax. They've done all these good economic reforms. But when you look at their demographic profile, their fertility rate, I think, is down to 1.4. You need to be 2.1 to keep your population stable. They have a fertility rate of 1.4 and an aging population. So even a country that I like that has done good free market reforms in the long run is in deep, deep trouble. And heck, I mean, those factors apply in the U.S., and I wouldn't be surprised if they apply in Anguilla as well. We all are going to be in deep trouble if we don't figure out in an environment of aging populations and smaller childbearing, we have to figure out how to make government work. And none of us are doing that very well right now. Long answer again. I'm sorry I get long-winded. In some sense, instability and bad news in the onshore world historically has been good news for the offshore world because people wanted the safety of moving their money outside their borders. And think about it. If you're in Cyprus or now you're in Spain and you're in Italy, you want to move your country, you want to move your money out of the domestic economy. So that'll certainly benefit places like Switzerland and Liechtenstein and whatnot, but instability and bad government historically has been the friend of the offshore world. But on the other hand, instability and bad government in the onshore world creates all these pressures for these multilateral and unilateral initiatives that threaten the IFCs. So it's a double-edged sword. At the end of the day, if the world economy, though, here's what it boils down to. At the end of the day, if the world economy is suffering, sooner or later, it's going to negatively affect. Obviously, it affects the tourism sector and things like that, but it also can affect the financial flows as well. If people don't have wealth, there's not investment. And if there's not a growing economy, there's no reason to invest, or there's less reason to invest. So it's this is where I get back to my pessimism. I'm very worried about the world over the next 30 years because I just think policy trends are wrong, demographic trends are wrong. It's just not a good situation. Well, I think the point you made about being careful during the boom years is critical. When I was on that staffing that Miller Commission for the Cayman Islands, because they hit their own fiscal crisis. Why did they hit their fiscal crisis? Because when things were going well, the Cayman government was spending money hand over fist. It's sort of very analogous to what happened in California, during the dot-com years and stuff like that. California was getting all this capital gains revenue and whatnot, and so they were spending money. And then all of a sudden, when the economy hits the skids, the revenues go like that, and the spending sort of overshoots. And what I've been advising governments, especially in the U.S., but also elsewhere, is what Switzerland has done. They put in a system that basically says, doesn't matter how much your revenues are growing in any one year, spending can't grow faster than inflation plus population. And that, I think, is a very sound fiscal rule. It's very stable. It does allow spending to grow, but it means that you can't go out of control. And I think that's a good rule for any government to follow.
What happens if you don't have a FATCA plan in place by the presumed deadline? What is the mechanics of your sanction?
Well, of course, this assumes that Treasury would actually follow the law, which already they're not doing with the whole IGA process. But ultimately, the sanction of FATCA is the withholding tax, right? And that's a pretty nasty thing, because it's not just a withholding tax on income; it's a withholding tax on financial flows. So if you sell an asset that you bought for $10 million, you sell that asset for $9 million, you actually lost money, but that $9 million is a financial flow with a 30% withholding tax on it. So it's a very nasty penalty, which is why so many people feel that they have no choice but to comply. But in terms of the technicalities, again, I'm not a tax lawyer, so
But I mean, in the practicality, say an Anguillan institution, say the bank, one of the local banks, what would be the direct effect on that bank if Anguilla did not get on board with the FATCA? Or the
well,
IGA?
when exactly it would happen and how it would happen, I confess I don't know, but ultimately it's going to be that tax. Now, what can a bank do to get around it? Well, they can very obviously decide not to have any U.S.-based assets and not to have any U.S. investments. Now, it's again just a policy wonk. I don't know the real-world implications